at 5:30. I am chairing today's.
Recording in progress.
I'm chairing today's meeting as Chair Blackerby could not attend today. And so can we start with the roll call, please? Committee Member Bickford. Committee Member Bickford.
She's doing attendance.
For attendance, say that you're present.
Larry Bickford is here.
Okay.
Committee Member Malavas.
Here.
Committee Member Rodriguez.
Present.
Chair Sheetslag. Present. Committee Members Smith and Metzenberg are absent. All right. And for our agenda tonight, Ms. Grant, are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair Sleesag, there's no changes to tonight's agenda.
All right, and so now we will move on to public comment and open the floor for public comment. So at this point, any member of the public can address the committee for up to 2 minutes for any issue that's within the jurisdiction of the committee that is not on tonight's agenda. Do we have any speakers tonight? Chair Seedslab, we have no speakers for public comment, in person or online, but we did have an electronic public comment, which has been distributed during the meeting from Peter Smith. All right, thank you, and we'll all look at that. Now moving on to announcements.
Actually, sorry, we have one raised hand.
Okay.
From Conrad Metzenberg.
All right,
Okay.
go ahead.
Please unmute and you can begin. I don't think we can hear you.
All right. Maybe we can return back to Conrad Metzenberg. Because he is not present in person tonight, he will need to participate just as a member of the public.
All right. And Ms. Grant, any announcements tonight?
Yes, I have a few announcements. The first announcement is that there will be an update on the Create State effort. That's the long-range planning effort on State Street at City Council on September 17th. No other details besides that, other than the staff report typically is posted on a Thursday preceding the Tuesday meeting. So please go to the city website at santabarbaracity.gov for city council agendas to see the staff report September 12th. And the other two announcements I have is our active transportation planning projects, the Cycle 6 projects. We continue to be in design on all three projects, and we're gearing up this fall for several community engagement meetings just to update the community on the progress. And so kicking off some of those community engagement meetings, we have September 18th and 19th for the Milpas Crosswalk Safety Project. Specifically, we'll be covering the tree issue. And we should be having public announcements for all of those going out just after Labor Day weekend. And so any announcement for that, I will share with the Transportation Circulation Committee. And you're more than welcome to come. And the September 18th would be a webinar, and then the 19th would be in person. And it's going to be held at Franklin Elementary School. The next one that we have dates for is the West Side and Lower West Side Neighborhood Transportation Management Planning Implementation Project. It's such a mouthful for that project. But we plan to have a focused webinar and in-person meeting specifically to look at the protected bike lane layout on MODOC between Mission and Las Positas. And those tentative dates are September 25th and 26. The meeting in the 26th will be in person at La Cumbre Junior High. And again, you're more than welcome to come. I will be, again, sending out emails once we get closer and once we have the community notices go out. And then we don't have dates yet for Cliff Drive, but we've also been in the process and we're gearing up for an update for that one as well. I would anticipate that would also be in early October because it's the same staff on all three projects. We just have to make sure that we are parceling out and not having everything happen on the same week. All right, that concludes my announcements.
All right, thank you. Any clarifying questions from the committee before we move on? No? All right. So the first item on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes from our meeting on June 27th, 2024, and we should all have a copy of those. Do we have a motion to approve?
This is Kathleen. I move to approve the minutes as presented this evening in our packets.
Yes, and just to clarify, we realized I think we were missing one of the motions of the second item, and so that was included, and that's before you, right in front of you of the minutes that you have here tonight.
Okay, so we have a motion from Committee Member Rodriguez. Is there a second?
I'll make a second.
All right, second from Committee Member Malavos. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? And the motion approves unanimously. All right, and now we will move on for our reports. We have a report from Ms. Grant about Safe Streets for All Action Plan. So I'll hand it over to Ms. Grant.
Thank you. So yes, we just have one item on tonight's, full board item on tonight's agenda, and it's the Safe Streets for All Action Planning effort. And really the recommendation tonight is just to receive a presentation about the planning effort. Thank you. I just realized my microphone was not on. Rookie move. Now that I'm mic'd, again, we'll be talking about the Safe Streets for All Action Plan planning effort. And to kick off, what is the Safe Streets for All grant program? It's a federal program from the U.S. Department of Transportation. It's a relatively new grant. I believe they've only had about one or two cycles so far, and it's about for over the next 5 years to have about $5 billion go into Safe Streets for All planning grants and implementation grants, which would essentially be projects or programs that would be put in place. And so those are the two main components of the program. And we were very excited. We applied for it back in 2023, and in December of 2023, we were notified that we were awarded for a Safe Streets action plan to put that together. And so what we were awarded was just about $800,000 with a 20% city match. The goal of the plan is to prevent traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries within the city while increasing safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all by strategically identifying infrastructure improvements that remove barriers to safe mobility. Just a little background on why we applied for this grant. To date, we've had the bulk of our pedestrian master plan projects that were called out in the 2006 pedestrian master plan essentially completed, And we're on track to complete all of the major projects from the bicycle master plan that was adopted in 2016 to be completed over the next few years. And so, again, we've had pretty much the bulk of both of those efforts funded. But as we know, our job is never done in trying to get complete streets within the city and a safe network for all road users. And we really see this planning effort as the sort of 2.0 as follow-ups for the pedestrian master plan and bicycle master plan, really looking holistically at a complete streets network. The focus really will be for this action plan focused on our high priority Vision Zero corridors that have already been identified by the 2018 Vision Zero strategy that Council adopted back in 2018. In the policies, I believe it was 2016. And also a big component is to look at our safe routes to school routes, and again to make those safe and comfortable routes for students and families getting to and from school. So as prescribed by this federal grant, there's the following main components, and I'll talk about all of these just as an introduction of what we would expect the plan that will eventually come before the Transportation Circulation Committee for review. The first component is leadership commitment and goal setting. And this is really pertains to a lot of the Vision Zero philosophy. So not everybody that has applied for the grants, it's who can get these grants or city or county jurisdictions or tribal communities that qualify for this grant source. And so not everybody has Vision Zero policies already in place. So some of it's just starting out to have a program. We already have that embedded already within the city. But as I said, that this is sort of a 2.0 to a pedestrian master plan and bicycle master plan. It's kind of a follow-up to the Vision Zero strategy to really take it to the next step. So far, and I've been attending, our team has also been attending various trainings, and instead of like the vision, embedded within the Vision Zero, the federal government uses the safe systems approach, and to your left is the common graphic that you'll see at the federal government level, which is very similar to the city's Vision Zero core principles. And so it's really, again, on the premise that we need to have safe roads for all users, safe speeds, safe vehicles, that death and serious injury is unacceptable. Humans make mistakes. Humans are vulnerable. Responsibility is shared. Safety that needs to really be on the proactive end. You never want to be on the reactive end. And redundancy is crucial. So embedded under that philosophy, that will be a big part of the carrying that through in the action plan. But of course, the city has taken some of that with already in our adopted Vision Zero strategy, and I'll just repeat out where you can see the similarities that we have in our 7 core principles: that every person matters, life is most important, people make mistakes, drivers have a critical responsibility, pedestrians and cyclists are most vulnerable roadway users. We need to focus on the dangerous locations and behaviors, and again, those are our Vision Zero high priority corridors. And government shares the responsibility for safe streets. So, again, trying to be on the proactive end of safety when we look at our roadway network. The second component is planning structure, and basically for the action plan, they want a planning entity to review the action plan. And fortunately, we already have that structure in place at the city, which is the Transportation Circulation Committee. So you will be the reviewers of the plan, and the plan will ultimately go to City Council for review and approval. For the safety analysis, again, that's looking at our roadway and collision data. I'll skip to, this was back for when the Vision Zero strategy was adopted in 2018. On your left is just an image of the collision heat map. So wherever you see a color on this page represents a level of collision, with red being the highest concentration of collisions, and then less in the green. If you don't see a color on the map, then that's, we don't have collision history in those sections. And then at the time when the Vision Zero strategy was adopted, we had 23 priority corridor streets that we were looking at. So we look at this every year, and we typically look in 10-year increments for our safety analysis. But it's also, as you know, a lot of times you see our projects that come in for your review for consistency with the circulation element and our various plans. And usually it takes a while to see, like, over time, hopefully the heat map will be cooled to address those collision patterns. But it takes several years of analysis to make sure that are we still having patterns or not, or did we address those patterns of collisions with the said infrastructure project. Not everything can be addressed by infrastructure. A lot of times it's education and enforcement and, of course, evaluation. But some of the things that we want to do in this planning effort is to really dive in a little bit more to the priority corridors. And we're looking at a lot of jurisdictions have done high injury network mapping. And also what we're playing around with, a lot of the grants we apply for, sometimes they just want to see collision data in 3-year increments, sometimes 5-year increments. But we're trying to find a way visually and using GIS to analyze our collision analysis to see how much of it can be automated and for review. And of course, we still need our planning professionals and engineers doing the work as well. So that's another component of the grant, is just to really have an in-depth safety analysis. The other components is engagement and collaboration. This is, there are 17 schools, K through 12 public schools within the city of Santa Barbara. And so we plan to initially go out with surveys for the schools related to safe routes to schools and what sort of the issue areas are. And we're working with California Walks and Safe Trek. They're organizations that assist through another grant process. There isn't monetary exchange. It's just more they're funded by other sources in the state to help out jurisdictions with proper development of surveys and outreach. And so we're working with them on the survey development. In addition to the school surveys, we would anticipate we would have additional surveys for those living on our high injury networks, as well. And very similar to how we do community outreach in addition to the surveys would be just additional in-person listening workshops. And then once we've heard from the community, how can we approach that? Either is there an engineering solution? Is it something that we need to work on for education programming? Is there enforcement? Those types of things. So, yeah, we plan to kick that off hopefully this fall. Another component of the grant is equity considerations. And the grants that we work on and defining what is considered a disadvantaged community, a census tract, some grants label it as environmental justice community. All I know is with all the sources we've applied to date have very different definitions on how that's defined, and it's defined by the grant source. And so our disadvantaged communities, depending upon what source we're working in, can look very different. But for this particular grant source, what was defined, and there's basically a GIS mapping. It's called the USDOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer Map. It's available to anybody online. And these that you see up on the screen are the qualifying census tracts that, again, by the federal government deem as disadvantaged. So there will be extra focus on the collision data to see if we have any trends of higher collisions in the disadvantaged community tracts. Generally, if you look from a local, state to federal level, a lot of times in disadvantaged community areas is where you'll see a higher number of collisions. And I think a lot of times on the serious and fatal, because a lot of times the disadvantaged communities have a higher level for walking and biking and transit use. And so, as you know, pedestrians and cyclists are most vulnerable users on the roadway network. So we will take a deeper dive to see if there's, any correlation to that as well in the planning effort. Another component is looking at policy and process changes. So what I'm really proud of is a lot of the staff we've had before for transportation planning were really amazing and had a lot of forward-thinking policies in our existing documents between the circulation element and our various plans. But we'll take a look to see if there's anything else that would need to be updated. One thing I did notice that a lot of communities are adopting resolutions for complete streets. We have that embedded in the language of the Vision Zero strategy that we analyze with a complete streets lens, but we don't specifically have a resolution on complete streets. So certain things like that we might want to look at as we go through this planning effort. And then finally, once we have all the community engagement and approaches, that will be summarized in whether we need to have additional capital infrastructure projects and the strategies for implementation. So just an example for the bicycle master plan, it was broken into 3 different phases. It was basically from the adoption, the first 5 years, we shall have these projects funded. And then in the next 5 years, these projects need to be funded. And so I would envision that would also be a big component of this action plan. And again, typically, we would have a mix between short-term projects midterm projects and long-term projects, and hopefully ballpark costs. We do have some money to probably do maybe 4 or 5 concept drawings of some of the infrastructure projects that might arise out of this effort. So we did have that in the cost of the grant, making up that $800,000 was to maybe have right-of-way survey done, so then we can do a few sketches. Because the more we can think about projects earlier on just makes us more well-positioned for actual implementation grants. And for this particular source, you can't immediately apply for an implementation grant without having an adopted safety action plan. So that is why we're going through this planning effort first. And then finally, just progress and transparency. Again, what we say for the strategy, and if we are going to implement something within the first year or 5 years, that we have a process, and that would essentially entail going back to community and the Transportation Circulation Committee to say, yes, we're on this and we have it handled, or no, we are still seeking funding to implement XYZ projects, that type of thing. So those were all the major components. I have outlined in the staff report a little bit more details on some of the scope. And that's essentially it. This is a 2-year process to complete the planning effort. The biggest part is it's amazing. We were notified of the award in December of 2023. We are still going through the contract process. It's amazing the level of paperwork, and we deal with state representatives within that then work with the federal representatives, and I don't think we realized it would take this long. I think in a lot of the trainings, they said about 3 to 4 months for the contract to be executed, and then we would go to city council to appropriate. Just haven't happened yet. We are in email contact probably every other week on the status, so they're just kind of waiting in line, I think, because it is a federal grant, and probably all the entities involved. It's probably just takes a while to clear that stage. But one thing that's nice, once we do get the okay that the contract's been approved, then we can officially appropriate the funds. What's nice about the planning effort, unlike some of our capital projects where we have to implement funding in certain phases, we will have the entire amount up front. So that's really nice. So we don't, in that 2-year, have to keep returning to council for additional appropriations. So that will be nice. And like I said, once we get the official green light, because technically we can't work on this effort just yet, we will then be launching all the surveys and listening workshops. And this is a really big undertaking, and as you know, we have very critical projects in our list right now for the Active Transportation Program Cycle 6 that we're trying to implement. So we will be doing this effort in tandem with those, but I do want to reiterate, we will not be slowing down the process of the Cycle 6, that those get the priority. And then we'll go from there. It really depends on the community engagement process of how many things come up and what we need to analyze. But really excited to kick off this effort once we get the green light to do so. And we will be back at the Transportation Circulation Committee with updates along the way. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. So I will now open to committee questions. I'll go to Committee Member Bickford.
Got it.
First, thanks, Jessica. That was great. You actually answered most of my questions before I had to ask them. But I do reflect on the fact that we've been working on these plans for nearly 20 years. And you and your team have developed all kinds of data and plans to fix the infrastructure, some of which has already been funded through different processes. How does this relate to that? You alluded to that a little bit
Yes.
at the end.
Great question. So what we're working on is implementation of all of the existing plans to date. So essentially the pedestrian master plan and the bicycle master plan. But really the cycle 6, and then if we also get funding for cycle 7, outside of those projects, there isn't any other projects outlined in our capital program for active transportation beyond that. And so really this, like I said, it's the follow-up plan because the other ones will have been implemented.
My follow-up question, as an example, where does the plan to pave and restripe and add bike lanes to Upper State Street fall into previous plans and this plan?
So the great question again. So what was mentioned in the Upper State Street was to have State Street as the spine network for our bike facilities. What it called out for in the 2016 plan was to have on-street bike lanes. And as you know, that there's been changes to that, and with the State Street Promenade, at the time of the planning effort, there was not a big focus on Upper State Street. All the focus went into having a strong east-west route, which was the East Side and West Side Paseos projects that ended up funding that effort. Of course, improvements on Cliff Drive, a lot of improvements sort of in the downtown grid. And so I do expect that Upper State Street will be a big focus for change. I know that you have mentioned it in the past, and we've received emails from residents as well to have higher level facilities. And I think this time is very ripe for that, and just we're probably going to be seeing a very different Upper State Street too, with the redevelopment of like La Cumbre Plaza, for example, where we'll now have a lot more community attention in that area of the city. Okay.
All right, other questions? Committee Member Rodriguez?
Yeah, this is amazing work, and what I'm struck by is that all the layering over the years, and this as you described in the action plan, that leadership, commitment, goals, and goal setting. This is a federal project. I'm just fascinated to wonder across the country. I know we were early implementers on Vision Zero, but are we way ahead of the curve already in this process? That would be nice. Or has this really caught on like wildfire around the country, especially with the federal money, that everybody's doing Vision Zero, everybody's doing improvement, everybody, wants bike lanes. I'm just curious,
Yeah.
with your workshops? What are you
Right.
seeing? What are
Well,
you hearing?
We were not a first adopter of Vision Zero. Of course, it originated back like in Sweden, and so it's really been sort of the worldwide program. And then preceding us on Vision Zero were a lot of the bigger, think the San Francisco, Los Angeles, but definitely in terms of what we're seeing in various trainings is really that, yeah, as they mentioned, Vision Zero or that safe systems approach, and then Caltrans recently adopting like complete streets, that they need to have that in their programming at the state level. So it is very exciting that that's becoming more and more the vocabulary. I think what's also interesting, and as we dive more into the collision data, is I think we were hoping that collisions would be decreasing, and we're still seeing a high level of collisions, and that's trending. We seem to be trending just like the state and nationwide statistics for that. And that's what we hope to get kind of dive more into the data on that, because we've been really looking at corridor approaches, but that's something that we want to see is, are we shifting? Are the problems then happening elsewhere? Is it more, are we seeing patterns anymore? Or if it's one-off sort of anomaly cases, that type of thing. So that's what we're excited on this effort, is to dive more into that.
One more question and a comment. My question is, I don't know what complete streets means. I'd like to understand that.
So complete streets is really, there is a time period where somebody would do an infrastructure project, but really with just thinking of the automobile in mind. And or that you're just thinking of the pedestrian, or like kind of more in silos for the road users. And complete streets means, no, we're going to have drivers on this network for pedestrians, cyclists, transit. How can we holistically look at all the users and to address all user needs? And sometimes it's that you select, or like we said when we had like the East Side West Side sales projects, it's like, well, we're going to have one route that will be more of our bike friendly street, the east west route, that we would favor certain modes on certain streets. So anyway, it's again just a bigger holistic approach on roadway design.
And I would also like clarification on your Vision Zero chart with the blue and the red and the green. I'm just confused. It says total severe or fatal accidents are blue, but then it says pedestrians or bicyclists. So where's cars?
So that would be in the, well, it could be in all three of those levels. So total, it could be with for vehicle to vehicle, but the pedestrian injury related is a lot of times it's ped versus vehicle, or vehicle versus ped. And same thing with cyclists. It's typically cyclist versus vehicle. This is just a snapshot from our Vision Zero strategy. Both of these are that I included, of just kind of this is the baseline for what we're coming from. On our Vision Zero website, we actually have the heat mapping for every like 10-year period. So then we have the 2009 to 2019 and that type of thing. But we're trying to decide, do we still do the heat mapping way to tell the story? Is there another way to tell the data. So again, that's something that we'll be looking at in this effort.
This is my last statement. We'll be done. This is a comment. I'm quite interested to see how things transition as the electric bike becomes more and more utilized, especially since we don't have any state laws yet that I know of to curtail the speed, give training to 12 to 16-year-olds who are all getting hurt. It's a big concern. So it'll be real interesting to see how that shows up
Right.
in the next
Yes.
few years.
Yes,
That's
and
my
and it
comment.
was that's also something too where in prior data and some of these years that none of the collisions were coded to differentiate an e-bike cyclist versus just a conventional bike cyclist. And so it wasn't until about 2021, 2022, where we started to get some of that data. But again, that's only the police report data, and what we're still struggling with locally, mainly for HIPAA issues, is trying to understand through hospital records to tell the other story. Because even though we're working in police reports, it probably only scratches the surface of roadway injuries. And we think that the hospitals would have a better view, another data source to see where incidents are happening. So again, I've been attending a lot of the e-cyclist trainings that have been going on. Recently attended one in April that was phenomenal, but we're not the only, of course, jurisdiction or state, and again, happening nationwide on how best to deal with e-bikes and what the legislation is. There's been a lot of legislation out there. CalBike happens to have the best, I think, summary of what's pending out there at the state level. So that's something, if you're interested in following, and I can follow up with an email of some of the source data. But yeah, in terms of planning and infrastructure, what's really interesting is versus like regular conventional bikes is you would see kind of more the conventional bike riders on certain networks on city streets. But as an e-bike cyclist, and it's easier to blend in with the speed of traffic because you can easily go, 17, 20 miles an hour. And so we're seeing e-bike cyclists much more on the broader just city roadway network, which they are completely legally allowed to do. But when we think of designing for the future for infrastructure, what does that look like? So I think we will probably definitely have some e-bike related strategies because that just wasn't big focus. It's really it's come. The technology's been there for a long time, but it's really obviously come on kind of since pandemic era where e-bike cycling has exploded. And what we've seen, we've been working with UCSB too. It's been a great collaboration, and they've done some like video counting and just trying to discern of like how many e-bikes versus conventional bikes are on our network. And they were saying at certain times when they've done the analysis, about 50% e-bikes, 50% conventional bike riders. So yeah, definitely a very hot topic, and of course on the enforcement end as well.
Any questions? Back to, Committee Member Bickford.
Relating to what you asked about the state regulations for e-bikes, do you have any awareness with the current status of the Assembly bill that was supposed to deal with that? Because I know it failed
Right.
in committee last year, and as of February, it's stalled. So it's
There's actually, yes, several legislation that's out there, and I know that Committee Member Rodriguez, where you mentioned we're putting age limits, and so far I haven't seen anything that's been put into law yet. They're still. It's always confusing when they have the first reading, the second reading, the third reading, and all of that. So that CalBike website is really great. And again, I can forward you the link, but it does provide a status of where all the legislation's at. And there's like at least maybe, I was just on it the other day, maybe 15 to 20 different assembly bills, and not that, like, yeah, some of them have failed and not gone anywhere, but I would suspect that there would be some legislation coming. I think, again, with the collision data, because there hasn't been, even on the trainings that I've been, there isn't enough data yet to show patterns, but they do have some trends related to that. And yeah, so the highest number of injuries happens to be males, and they're, yeah, about the 12 to 17 age bracket.
All right, yeah, I think I saw several people writing down the CalBike name. so that
Yes,
would
and
be
I can make sure
great
that I
resource.
get the correct,
you.
yeah, the extension on it.
I had just a couple questions. I think first is, so I think you said, we've kind of completed most of the projects outlined in the pedestrian master plan and bike master plan. We have the Vision Zero analysis. Is the results of this intended to become a kind of new, I think it's referred to as an action plan. Is it intended to be a new document, and are we combining pedestrian and bike in a single plan? And what do you think kind of the implications for that are?
Right. That's a great question. And the short answer is we don't know yet what that until we really dive into it. I anticipate that it would be a standalone plan, but I think and I would feel too, a lot of the pedestrian master plan and bicycle master plans have merged into active transportation plans. That's been kind of the latest thing to do. And I'm not quite sure what that will look like, or if we'll have a policy that we then will merge like both plans into an active transportation plan. But the goal is to also not have a bunch of like too many plans, or where it's confusing for the community of what do they look at. I think obviously like a lot of the policies we want retained from both of those documents, because a lot of them are already so well written. But I'd anticipate like the capital list would be updated with the safety action plan. And so do we make amendments to the pedestrian or bicycle master plans? Not quite sure yet. And, that might be a question for the community later, or committee later on, once we dive into the effort.
Yeah, I think I'm also thinking about, if we have a fully institutionalized bike share program, then pedestrians and bikes are, you might walk and bike in the same trip. And so I think making sure there's coordination
Exactly.
would be really helpful.
And to honor, again, all roadway users too, and not necessarily single amounts. So.
My other question is, and I think this is, for any kind of planning over the next decade at least, is how do you develop plans like this, with the knowledge that, yes, at some point there will be a very large housing block where there's an old mall now, and not fully know, are you just modeling how traffic might change, or how do you incorporate that into a process like this?
Right, we have a separate process, and it's it has gone before the Planning Commission. A lot of times it's tied to a lot of the general plan policies, but we recently did a citywide traffic model update because a lot of the traffic models related to our land use and growth. And we had a traffic model that was done part of the general plan effort in 2011. There was one update to the model in 2015. Typically, you want to update a traffic model every about 5 to 7 years just to see where we're at in terms of the roadway network. But what was unique about this last model update that was approved by council in March of 2024 is it changed from just a traffic model to a travel model. So it had two components to it. It was looking, again, at level of service of impacted intersections, and then but also looked at vehicle miles traveled, which is the new threshold for environmental review. So it kind of moves away from the congestion-based analysis of level of service and like the operation side, and moves to more of increased vehicle, that you want to try to decrease vehicle miles traveled to from an environmental standpoint to decrease greenhouse gas emissions. So we continue to work on that effort, and that's my whole land development side of our planning.
All right, if there are no other questions from the committee, we'll open to public comment. Do we have any speakers?
Chair stays live. We have no speakers for public comment.
All right, and then we will move into any final committee comments that anyone would like to.
Kind of a question. So I think you made it very clear the purpose of what to do with the grant money, how you'll go about doing it. And it's basically, seems to me at least, like a refresh on the pedestrian and the bicycle master plans, right? Like the next
Yes.
phase of planning.
Yes.
I guess my question is, what would life have been with or without this grant money, right? Where you said, you made that mention about going to council for appropriations for, this gives you the runway to complete that next research gathering and project planning for the next phase of these two plans.
Yeah, I think without this grant source, we probably would have been looking at other potential grant sources through the active transportation program. And we saw this potential one as appealing because it wasn't a huge lift in the application, like unlike the active transportation program where you're spending hours and hours on end. It was a fairly easy process to apply for the money. But if we hadn't gotten this grant, like I said, we probably would have tried other sources along the way. And I think it's just, yeah, we're trying to, it's hard because we're really in the midst of implementing really transformative projects right now. But like I said, our job is never done when it comes to keeping our streets safe. So we really felt like we needed to have something in the queue to line up kind of the next round of projects.
Closing comment. I think Santa Barbara always feels like we're ahead of the curve on things. I know it's just vanity about where we live, I suppose. But I think it's very exciting that this bipartisan infrastructure law, which is huge, and I read that it's the biggest thing that's happened in many, many, many years. And I'm excited about the thought that other cities who haven't even begun to do any of the strategic planning or Vision Zero work are now starting around the country. We're going to raise the bar for everyone. And I look at the work here as expanding on what we've already done, and that many other places are going to be, at the beginning stages.
Right.
But different people starting in different places, but you guys, it's kind of like you're kind of grabbing the ring as it goes by, and you've already been running on the carousel for a while.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting. They had one graphic in some of the trainings. It's approximately 45,000 Americans die each year in traffic-related collisions. And when you look at 45,000, that's like roughly like a professional baseball stadium of people. And I think it's just, at one point, they're, pre-Vision Zero, the fluff is like, oh, it's just a fact of life that, people will die in traffic-related collisions. And so it is really nice that the dialogue is changing where, no, the collisions can be prevented. And it's very exciting to see that in the vocabulary.
Any other comments? All right. I think, this looks really exciting, and I'm excited for it. I feel like it has a very concrete. It's not just a plan that's going to be planned and sat on the shelf. It does feel like this is very active, and there's direction and goals for this, and I think there's a lot of community support. So, thank you for all your work on this.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. And I think that is our last item for tonight. So I think we can move to adjourn at 6:26 p.m.
Thank you all.